This part needs to be cut out for sure. And I just don't like that. Hmm. are you kidding me? Okay, so now I'm going to do this again. Let's see what happens. Oh, are you kidding? Started it too soon. Hey, everybody. I know I'm early, and we're streaming early. We're about 7 minutes early, but I wanted to hop in and make sure that I say, hey, welcome to April, and take a minute to go over the topics that we're going to be talking about this month, because I think it's important. We know, especially with COVID and COVID habits, and just the things that I'm seeing inside of the industry itself, as well as with my specific population and the people that I talk to. in networking groups and in some of those other groups that I belong to. So, we've been having a lot of deep conversation about some really important things. So I did want to make sure and go ahead and hop in here a little bit early, because I think it'll be important to highlight and outline what's coming up. And we will have some guest speakers. Today you're stuck with just me. But we will have some people that are going to be coming in and joining us to have some of these conversations. Anyway, this month we are talking very specifically about levels of addiction and some of those pressures of comparison that come about, because a lot of people don't have a clear view of what addiction and recovery truly look like outside of the social norms, right? And I think it's critical, especially right now that we're a year into COVID and all of that, to look at the fact that not all addictions are the same, and how no two stories truly look the same. And it's important that we have conversation about severity levels and how and why they vary. So today, as you can see, or maybe have read, the topic today is understanding that all addictions are not chemical in nature. And we're going to be talking about, introducing what some of these process and behavioral components look like. But on the 14th, we're going to be talking about severity levels for all types of addiction and how they vary, but also how to know where you or a loved one may fall on those scales. On the 21st, we're going to be talking about treatment options. Now, this is going to be a really broad topic because there is something for everyone and every level of need. And I think that one's going to be, a really important one for people to listen into. And then on the 28th, we're going to be talking about how to determine what's going to best serve you or your loved one. And so that'll wrap up the month with some really pertinent information, because as we're talking today about looking at some of these process and behavioral components, I think it's important that we also discuss how a lot of times the chemical addiction that maybe takes more of that premier role, if you will. I think that when we look at that, usually the process and behavioral components tend to be more of the primary source. And, we have things like perfectionism, we have fear of failure, we have social anxieties, we have, that need to feel valid in life based on how we appear to others. And these are underlying issues that a lot of times stem from, well, it could be as early as childhood. I mean, if I bring in my story, I think I just was innately born with this need to excel in the with that intent to be noticed, paid attention to, or acknowledged. And I think that happens with a lot of large families, and I just happen to have like a really large age gap, and I don't want to go into like my childhood or anything like that, but like I can look back and I can see characteristics of that, needing to like be completely color coordinated all the time, and just different things, and pushing myself to to be good at anything that I set out to do. But more than that, just those control needs. And so, if we look at, textbook case, like it's not really a mystery that I was going to fall prone to eating disorders, disordered eating, food addiction, and things like shopping addiction, alcoholism, which for me with the alcohol, that was multi-leveled. Like I learned at a young age that it helped numb out some pain, but it also was a big coping mechanism for me through some serious traumatic events. But the underlying things that I had to really take a look at and work on in my journey over the last 8 years, well, and my recovery journey has been more like 25. Again, I brought up the eating disorders, disordered eating, food addiction. And you notice I call them out differently because they all had a different relationship for me in my life. So, when body dysmorphia comes into play, like that was a different area. And so these are, not chemical in nature per se, but, treatable with some of the very traditional fashions and still needing to learn some of those very similar life skills and psychological tactics to move through them as needed for, say, that attachment to alcohol, or depending upon what it is for you, right? So in this journey, I've realized that it wasn't necessarily so much the chemical or the food or the whatever it was I was buying. At one point in time in my life, it was shoes and whatever that was all about, right? Like, and sure, I still enjoy buying a good pair of shoes, but we have all of these different layers underneath, and it stems from something else. And so if we look at this right now in COVID, right, like in this quarantine, in this social isolation, whatever level you're living in, because I think everybody has kind of chosen for themselves what feels right, and they're living to what feels comfortable for them, which I think to some degrees is the right way to approach life, right? Like we have to live for ourselves first, and feel good about that. But there's a lot of people right now who are falling prey to more what might be coined as a habit versus an addiction, and more behavioral in nature. There's no avoiding the fact that alcohol consumption has become an issue. It's become very habitual for people. And, through this period where it may have looked like, 1 or 2 beers after work every day, which still, by the way, is excessive by way of diagnosing. But what looked like something that, we didn't do until 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. And for some even later, some people, like they weren't even having a glass of wine until dinner was done and the kids were bathed. And then it was like this, relaxing glass of wine that they had with their spouse. But now, since COVID has arrived, a lot of people have taken to the midday drinking, and much earlier in the day because they're not leaving home, they're working from home, or they're homeschooling, and their stress is different. And so I really encourage you to look at not just your alcohol. What does what do your evenings look like? Do they look a whole lot more sedentary? Are you feeling very mundane and stagnant? Has your habit, your evening routine does that start a whole lot earlier now? Does it look like, I'm in sweats and parked on the couch by 6, and by 8, and I'm eating a gallon of ice cream, or whatever that, whatever that might be. But, taking a look at that, because it's, we get stuck in these ruts. And again, people refer to them as habits. In fact, I was reading an article this morning on Psych Central, and you know, the author of that particular article did refer to you know, quarantine habits, and listed out 23, and some were healthy, and some, you know, were big warnings to look at as not being healthy. And so our sedentary nature, what we're doing in that, are we eating differently, baking differently, shopping differently? Like shopping is, you know, totally different now. So what are we doing? So if we're bringing in the components of this, right? So addiction, even if you've formed a habit now that is, you know, daily drinking versus, you know, just drinking on the weekends, like that habit becomes a ritual very, very quickly. And I think, you know, a lot of people were like, oh, I'm just going to do this, you know, while COVID is here. Well, now we're a year in, and about 60 days in, that became something very habitual, which, you know, quite frankly, we treat as addiction, because it's something that I need to do, or I do without thought, and there's a purpose behind it. So I'm getting to this, right? So process and behavioral components which go with those addictions. So even if you're like, oh, I'm not an alcoholic, you know, I have a, you know, a drinking habit, or, you know, I don't have an eating disorder, I'm, you know, I'm an emotional eater. I hear that one all the time. I don't have a problem. I just am an emotional eater. Well, that's an issue. And shopping, you know, I go to the store to get, you know, our weekly, you know, groceries, or I go to the store to pick up 3 things that we need, and I end up buying, you know, 25 things that I didn't need. And I hear this a lot with the moms, you know, they go to Target for some school supplies and they come home with, you know, 10 new shirts, and, you know, new pillows for the couch, and all of these things, right? So we have process and behavioral components that illustrate to us that we have impulsive, compulsive needs that, if we're being honest with ourselves, have an emotional purpose. So we maybe, if we're looking, are feeling sad, empty, lonely, tired, bored, depressive, anxious. And so, you know, if we're feeling irritated, agitated, annoyed, or anxious, and we reach to alcohol, we're giving alcohol an emotional purpose. If we have something to celebrate, and we're like, oh, we're going to have this big celebration, yay, it's all around food and overconsumption of alcohol. So we're overindulging, and so we're attaching, you know, things to make our celebration better. So we have to be cognizant of that, because, you know, doing that, you know, having cocktails and eating food when you're celebrating isn't the wrong thing. The wrong thing is the overindulgence. So, because, you know, the alcohol doesn't make the celebration better. In fact, that's kind of an oxymoron, to use a, you know, some regular terminology, but it's a depressant. So why do we go out and celebrate with alcohol? Like, the sugar is what's getting us the rush, you know, and it's temporary. And I think if you look at any morning after, you'll see that, wow, you know, the outcome could have been a whole lot better. And if we have social anxiety, sure, it does take away some of those, you know, it lowers our inhibitions so that we feel like we can talk a little bit more freely. But why do we feel, where's that social anxiety coming from? Why do we feel like what we have to say isn't worthy of being heard? Or why do we feel like somebody might judge us poorly? And a lot of times that's, you know, we can tie to just society as a norm. If we get on our social media, this is the, you know, another area where we're generally seeking validation. We're seeking something outside of ourselves to bring us peace, joy, comfort, relief, or to make us feel more intelligent, more sought after, more popular, whatever it is, right? Like you have to ask yourself these questions. But sometimes you go on social media and it actually makes you feel worse about yourself. So why are you comparing? What are you hoping to gain? And, so we want to look at, and we'll call them habits, those processes, those behaviors. Why do I have social anxiety to begin with? Where is that stemming from? And if we can, really get to the bottom of that, then we can create or cultivate skill sets and tactics or thought processes that look a whole lot different. Because why do we need to have that acceptance from something or someone outside of us? Why can't we just feel good about what we think, feel, believe without somebody having to validate us? Why do we worry so much whether or not everybody agrees with us? Like, you might be completely disagreeing with everything I have to say right here, but I know time after time after time that my methods, my thoughts, my beliefs, and the way that I live my life is 100% accurate and definitely is proven to be effective with basically anybody that actually puts the time and the effort into the system and the practices. Those people that haven't had good results with what I'm referring to here, which is, changing that relationship with the self, that internal dialogue, and letting go of external controls, that external locus of control, that need for something outside of me to make me feel better, to make me feel good, to bring me peace, joy, comfort, relief, right? Like we we feel sad and we reach for food. We feel lonely and we reach for, others. Why can't we rely on ourselves first? So anyway, I know this to be true and effective based on, my client results. And I'm not saying that I'm the right fit for you per se, but this is what we want to be looking for. We want to know ourselves inside out. We want to be able to create our own joy and really feel okay living in our own skin and be able to sit in and move through uncomfortable situations without having to numb out, without having to find relief somewhere. And this is moving to that internal locus of control position where we can act intuitively, where we can actually create and generate emotional intelligence, true emotional intelligence that affords us that ability to be a good listener, to be an active listener, to be able to say, hey, you know what, I'm interested why you think, feel, and believe the way that you do. Tell me more about that. And then ask if that person even wants to hear how you think, feel, and believe about it, so that you don't feel so bad if you're met with resistance. Anyway, there's a whole list of things that we attach to that are outside of ourselves. Our need for physical exercise. Sure, it's healthy. It's a great habit, if you want to call it a habit. I like to refer to it as a lifestyle, and honoring my body, the vessel, the only vessel that I'll ever have. Like, if I don't treat it right, if I don't feed it right, if I don't get it enough exercise, if I don't listen to what it's telling me, if I don't get enough rest, all of those things, like, my vessel is going to break down and it's not going to perform for me well. But if we define our sense of self-worth and our value based on the size of our body, the shape of our body, or how physically fit we are, or if we just can't move through irritation, agitation, frustration, or stress without getting a physical release, then we need to look at that. It's a great avenue. It's a great outlet. It's a very useful tool, but to rely on that, I think a lot of people saw that when gyms closed down. There was a lot of devastation when gyms had to close their doors. Yoga centers had to close their doors. We were not equipped and armed with alternate plans. We didn't have a well-balanced life that had an array of recreational type situations that we like to do. We didn't have social outlets that we like to do because we relied 100% on the gym for our physical fitness, recreation, and socialization. And, we didn't know how to cross, do those. There were a lot of people that were just completely derailed because they couldn't be enmeshed with their family systems. They didn't, they were ill-equipped to rely on digital ways of staying connected. And the same goes for social. We're all very social beings. My social network, my social life is so much broader and bigger now because of COVID. Like, I'm connected with people all across the globe. Actually, I have people that I talk to and communicate with in Australia, Jamaica, and then, across the US and Canada. And so, again, we were just ill-equipped. So, we get attached to, gym and physical fitness. We get attached to diets. The diet culture is huge. And so instead of just creating a relationship with food that allows it to be what it's supposed to be, which is the fuel, so that our brains operate properly, our organs operate properly, and all of the, our endocrine system and all of the things, so that we reduce inflammation. If we're paying attention and we have the right relationship with food, it doesn't have an emotional piece. There is no emotional need for food. It is simply our fuel. So where's that attachment and how do we fix that? And the same goes for alcohol, for shopping, whatever it is that you're doing to increase dopamine, serotonin, endorphins in your life. If it's not coming naturally and we're not paying attention to what works well and why, and we're not making it lifelong, manageable, and maintainable, which those, fad crash diets are not lifelong, manageable, maintainable. So, there's all of these things. So let's take a look at what your habits, what your daily processes are, and let's look at how much we rely on them, and how are we relying on them, and why are we relying on them, and what are we expecting for them to produce for us, and why is it that we feel we can't rely on ourselves? Why is it that we need something outside of ourselves to bring us peace, joy, comfort, relief? What else? Emotional stability, right? Whatever it is, let's take a look at that, because as we go into levels of severity, this is going to be important. And I think, if we start earmarking the different things, right? Again, food, if there's different levels of severity, right? Like, I notice that when I'm sad, I go to these foods and I eat uncontrollably. I just talked to 3 women yesterday that, they're really missing, some significant intimacies in their life right now. And because they're very connected to people, and they're really missing that in-person connectivity. And they, so when they're feeling really sad and lonely, they're binging. I can't find a better word for that, right? So so they're binging, and that binging then creates a whole lot of other things on the backside. It prompts them to do things like over-exercise, so those compensatory measures, right? And everybody has their different things that they do, the restricting after a binge or an overindulgence, the swearing off, and, like, oh, I'm not going to have sugar. And they do, people do this. I'm not having sugar. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that for 30 days. Okay, but what about after? Anyway, a lot of things to talk about. So as we move into, the varying severity levels, how you can identify what types of treatments are available to you. I think you'll be surprised that there are a lot of things that are available to help people. And even those self-help measures, we want to touch on, how you can make them effective in your life, and not just, expect them to happen because you read it. And so I hope that this is making sense. I hope that this is shedding light, because I want us to have a broader perspective when we hear the words addiction and recovery needs. So addiction isn't just chemical in nature. It's not just for those people that are down, out, ill, and poorly functioning in their life. This isn't just for that person that stays intoxicated all day, every day. This isn't for the person that, every time they drink, or I'm sorry, this is for them, but it's not only referring to those people that can't control their substance use. This is for those people that can control it. For the daily drinkers that are, that have to have a drink every two drinks every day. That's above the minimum for us women. We're not built to have 2 drinks every day. We're just not. And so if we're doing that, it's an issue. We need to look at why. What's the attachment? What's it about? And how can we curb that? Because you may not have to give up alcohol, but you do need to change your relationship with it. And this goes for just about everything. Like, I don't have to go without food just because I've had food addiction issues. I don't have to eat a certain amount because I've had eating disorders, right? Like there's this thing, like, we have to have food. So, there's this way of changing the relationship and creating something that is not so emotional and attachment ways, so that you can do things appropriately, effectively, right? And I don't even want to use the moderation term, but be responsible and know your why. In fact, I had somebody tell me at one point, that they barely are drinking at all anymore because they did remove that emotional attachment. So they don't allow themselves to, or I shouldn't even say allow, they don't drink to celebrate, and they don't drink when there's sadness. So even if somebody dies, or there's something bad happens, they don't drink for either one of those reasons. They've taken away that it can't be for something. And so they're having the very, very periodic beverage and alcoholic beverage, because they removed that emotional piece to it. And so, there's a lot of things that we can do to, master the drop, right? Like, we don't have to have habits. Habits hold us hostage. And I don't believe in changing one habit for another. I think, that we need to have lifelong, manageable, and maintainable lives that are well balanced. And when I work with people on life balance, it's 8 primary categories with 6 subcategories. And we want them to be defined for each person individually, because what's spiritual for me is not spiritual for somebody else. And what's recreational for me is not recreational for somebody else. And, somebody's, family system looks completely different. So we have to define these for you specifically, but this allows you to not have habits, to just have a lifestyle, and have that lifestyle be lifelong, manageable, and maintainable, and very fulfilling and rewarding, and for yourself, honoring yourself. Like, if we're going to leave a legacy, why not leave the legacy that, that person truly loved and embraced and embodied everything that they believed in, that they dreamed of, that they desired, that they wanted, that they aspired to have, right? So anyway, I have definitely talked long enough. Again, I apologize for popping on early, but I do have clients to get to. So feel free, drop me direct messages, ask me more about this. And next week, hopefully we'll have 1 or 2 guests with us. I'm still getting all my confirmations in for the rest of the month. So Yeah, just send me a direct message if you have questions. If you're comfortable in chatting in the comments, chat in the comments. I will be dropping in all of my contact information and potentially even a little free gift for you in the comments. So anyway, have a great week. Happy April. It's springtime and it's World Health Month. So let's get healthy. Talk soon. I don't know how to end this.